Joining me now to discuss is faculty at the Leadership Institute and CEO of Optima Ed, Erika Donalds. Welcome back, Erika.
Days.
Thank you for being here because this is a big, big win for parents who pay tuition, students who are on their own, they're emancipated, they pay their own tuition. They're not going to be paying for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is literally like throwing money, cash, into a metal trash can and setting it on fire. So this is great.
It is good news. And, we have seen even in faculty surveys where you think faculty may be supportive of these types of initiatives, they've actually said in recent surveys that they feel that these DEI initiatives restrict diverse thought, not promote it because it makes them feel like they have to think or express themselves in a certain way because it is under the DEI mantra. So, in order to expand diversity of thought, we have to get rid of the DEI initiatives in our institutes of higher education. We've seen broad support across the country for eliminating this. We know President Trump obviously ran this as one of his pillars. We're going to see it taken out of the federal Department of Education as well. So I think we're going to be talking about this for a while and seeing a lot more of this trend.
So now let's think forward to some of the other universities because I'm concerned always with student achievement. During my time as a school board member, that was our primary focus. Of course, that was a long time before we had DEI. Back then, we were just doing diversity, and sometimes you would hear the word inclusion, but it hadn't yet taken root and been embedded in everything and have its own funding. We had a director of diversity at our kids' school district, but he mainly worked with parents, and the focus of those parents was educational test scores, and improving those test scores and closing the gaps between minority students and white students. And so when you look at what these universities are facing, a largely unprepared student populace coming into their settings, having to take remedial math courses, some of them even having to take remedial science courses in order to be able to handle the rigor of college level work. I think the money that they were spending on DEI would be better focused on remediation for students who are coming in.
Well, absolutely. And we do want to see those funds reallocated to that purpose. I mean, if you look at even the federal Department of Education, people are very worried about the amount of money that could be eliminated if that department is, taken down as President Trump has promised. But we just found out that they spent $1 billion in grants on DEI initiatives, which we know do not promote student achievement, whether it's the K-12 or the higher education level. And so we know that these consultants, the DEI consultants across the country, are making a killing on something that is not impacting the most important thing in our education institutions, which is our academic achievement. I think you'll also see a trend towards accountability in the higher education when it comes to student loans. When we do reform the student loan programs, not just looking at whether they're wasting money on DEI initiatives, but also whether they're wasting money on other types of courses of study that are not providing a return on investment, not just for the taxpayer, but for the student as well. And so we're going to have a renewed focus on meritocracy, on student achievement and results, and making sure that our higher ed institutions are accountable for their spending and for the type of coursework that they are investing our dollars in. Much of it is subsidized by tax dollars, and whether that's actually going to be productive for the American people.
It's the when we talk like this, Erica, the first thing that pops into my mind is how, you run your own business. It's an educational focused business, but it's still a business. At the end of the day, you can't pass a continuing resolution to satisfy your board. You actually have to balance a budget and you have to show them some improvement from last year. You're held accountable for that. And you don't mind it. You're not going against that. That's a part of what you do. And so many of us, we have businesses, we have business interests, maybe we're investing in other people's businesses. At the end of the day, there's accountability. We don't see that in government right now. It's just, I'm noticing that we're going to have another continuing resolution coming out of this congressional period. They're going to go home for the break on Friday, and if they can't come to an agreement, that parts of the government will shut down. But we don't have accountability there. We don't have accountability in our higher education system. Parents pay a lot of money in tuition, and sometimes their kids are there for 5 or 6 years due to this remediation thing that they have to go through, which means K through 12 educators are not being held responsible. They're not being held accountable for sending these students out of their buildings unprepared. How do we get back to having the same level of accountability that you and I are under for these educational institutions?
It's such a great question, Stacey, because government doesn't work in the way that businesses do. It's very difficult to hold a bureaucracy accountable, and that's why we want limited government. Congress has not passed a budget on time since 1996. So this is nothing new. This is what they do. The Department of Education failed 3 audits just in Secretary Cardona's time frame here under the Biden administration. So can you imagine how would I, as a business owner, get any investors or any stakeholders to believe in what I'm doing if I were failing audits every single year and hadn't passed a budget the entire time my company has been in existence? It just would not happen. And unfortunately, we as taxpayers, as far away from Washington as we are, and even though I'm a little closer maybe than most, we have no way of holding these bureaucrats accountable overall. And that's why we need to limit their power. We need to limit things like involvement of the Department of Education, the federal government in our education system, where you and I want to make decisions for our children in our communities, in our schools, and have nothing to do with these unaccountable bureaucrats in Washington. It's just not going to work. You and I served on school boards. It's hard to hold people accountable in your own community, just in the several thousand members of the community here working for the school system or involved with the school system, much less for anyone in Washington to either hold themselves accountable or the massive bureaucracy or the various entities around the country that are dependent upon the government. It's a not workable solution. That's why we need to diversify the power structure and put the power in the hands of parents. You know that I believe in that universal school choice and hope that we can not just break up the Department of Education, but take that power and put it where it belongs, in the hands of parents themselves.
I agree with you. And it's really hard to hold people accountable, period. It's not the easiest thing, but there are mechanisms in place for the private sector that seem they're not just invisible. It's like a black hole sucked all of the accountability out of government and it's never to return. I think limiting government is the key. And a prime example of that is the University of Utah and Weber State University in Ogden, both eliminating the cultural centers, because these are kind of like the churches of DEI, the cultural center
Right.
where they get to put these signs up and genuflect to the different, flags and all of that. And they're including the elimination of the resource centers for Black students, LGBTQ students, and women. And this is according to the Salt Lake Tribune. Last question here. We have about a minute. Erica, will the students survive without their cultural centers?
I'm certain they will survive. It's sad because there are some cultures that, do want to celebrate their history and how far they've come. African American culture, I'm a big believer in celebrating where people have been, but unfortunately, it has turned into a woke, liberal leftist propaganda machine. Instead of a celebration of the true history of these cultures and of our country that really brings people together around our accomplishments as a nation and accomplishments of various people who make up our wonderfully diverse America. That's what we want to see in these type of places, but they have been totally co-opted. When we were doing college tours with my oldest, and we saw these cultural centers with all the trans signs and the BLM signs and all the flags, and it's just such a turnoff because it really is divisive in a way that it was not intended when those things were set up. So unfortunately, I think students are going to find other ways to come together, whether it's fraternities, sororities, sports, intramurals, and other interests. I'm sure the college students will be okay. They'll have a great time and they'll still learn if we can get all of this nonsense out of our colleges and
Thank
universities.
you. Well, Erica, thank you so much for being with us this year on Salem News Channel. It's been a pleasure. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas. See you soon.
Same to you. Thank you.